You wouldn't believe the kind of things that can happen when love comes knocking where it's least expected. I've seen many things in my time, but this? Ha ha, this was something else. You wouldn't believe the story if I told you, but I saw it with my own eyes. A love so twisted, so unexpected, that even I couldn't make sense of it when I saw it happen. But love, they say, has a way of sneaking up on you in the most unlikely of places, even when everything in the world is telling you it's wrong. I have never told anyone this story, but it all started with my childhood friend Femi. Femi and Amara, they were the kind of couple you'd see and think they've got it all. But behind the closed doors of their neatly furnished apartment, things were far from perfect. Amara, the wife, was a force of nature, always on the move, always working, always chasing the next target at her corporate job. She earned more than Femi, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was she barely had time for him. Her life revolved around meetings, presentations, and deadlines. Even when she comes back from work, she would be on one Zoom meeting closing one deal or the other. Cooking? Rarely. Time with the kids? Almost never. She loved them, sure, but there was always something that needed her attention more. Always something pulling her away from home. Femi, on the other hand, was the opposite. He was a man of routine, of home-cooked meals, of family dinners around the table. He worked too, but his heart was always at home. He craved the warmth of family, the smell of dinner on the stove when he walked through the door, and the laughter of his children in the background. But Amara's absence left a big hole in that picture. He tried to talk to her about it countless times. "You're never here, Amara," he would say. "The kids miss you, I miss you. This isn't how it's supposed to be." Amara would sigh, mute the meeting, and face her husband. "Femi, I'm doing this for us. For the family. Don't you see? This is temporary." But temporary had stretched into years, and Femi's patience was wearing thin. It wasn't that he didn't appreciate her hard work, but he felt like he was losing her. The kids, too, were growing up in a house where their mother was more of a guest than a parent. And then there was the matter of the house itself, falling apart in her absence. Laundry piled up, dinners were often takeout, and the house had lost its warmth. Femi suggested getting a house help. After all, with Amara's income, they could afford it. But Amara had shut down the idea immediately. She'd heard stories of what could happen when you bring a young woman into your home. A colleague of hers had walked in on her husband and the house help, caught red-handed. The scandal had been the talk of the office for weeks. Amara wasn't about to risk her marriage, no matter how distant she and Femi had become. So she came up with a solution. Her younger sister, Ifeoma, Ife for short, was between jobs and had some free time. Why not have her come and help out? She trusted her sister more than anyone else in the world, and Ife was great with kids. Ife was always the pretty one, the one who turned heads at family gatherings. She had this way about her, gentle, submissive, everything Amara wasn't. I remember thinking about how different the sisters were, Amara with her power suits and commanding presence, and Effie with her soft voice and graceful movements. Maybe that should have been the first warning sign. Femi wasn't thrilled at the idea at first, but he agreed. Anything to bring some order back into their crumbling home. "Amara doesn't like me sharing this part of the story, so you've got to promise me you'll keep it just between us, okay?" Anyway, from the moment Ife arrived, I could see things changing in the house. She was the perfect homemaker, cooking, cleaning, and doting on the children in a way that Amara rarely had. She wasn't just good with the kids, she was great. The children adored her, and she quickly fell into the role of caretaker. She made sure everything ran smoothly, but it wasn't just the house that she took care of. Ifai took care of Femi, too, in ways he didn't even realize he needed. I remember watching it happen slowly, like a pot of water gradually coming to a boil. At first, it was innocent. Ife would cook his favorite food, jollof rice, and serve him dinner with a warm smile, kneeling slightly as she placed the plate in front of him, a gesture of respect that Amara had long since abandoned. She'd ask about his day, genuinely interested in how he was feeling. The conversations they had over meals became longer and more personal, and it wasn't long before I noticed Femi's gaze lingering on Iffy a little too long, a spark of admiration in his eyes. Then there were the little things, the way she'd dress a little more carefully when she knew Femi would be home, the way her laugh seemed to linger in the air when they talked, the little glances, the playful teasing. She was drawn to him, and I could see it in her eyes. I told myself that Iffy was a good woman. She would never betray her own sister in such a way. At first, she tried to fight it, I'm sure of it. She fought against her feelings with every fiber of her being, but it was no use. The heart wants what it wants, no matter the consequences. And it wanted Femi. I saw it in Femi, too. The way his eyes lingered on her a little longer than they should have. The way he started coming home earlier, staying in the kitchen while Iffy cooked, offering to help, even though he'd never been much of a cook himself. He was drawn to her warmth, her attention, in a way that he hadn't felt with Amara in years. There was something between them, something that neither of them could deny. I'll never forget the day I walked in on Iffy, standing in the kitchen in a thin, silky robe, her hair still damp from the shower. She had rushed in from her room to check what she was cooking. Femi was there, too, his eyes roaming her body shamelessly. The way they looked at each other, it was like the rest of the world had melted away, leaving only the two of them. To fill up the silence, Femi muttered, "Iffy, why does everything feel so easy when you're around?" I could hear Iffy chuckle shyly as I left the kitchen. From that moment on, I knew what was happening. Femi and Iffy were falling in love, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. And then the inevitable happened. One afternoon the kids were at school, and Amara was, as usual, at work. Femi had come home early, hoping to catch a quiet moment before the children came back and started running around. Iffy was cleaning up, and the door to her room was slightly ajar. He walked past, intending to go to his room, but something made him stop. Through the slightly open door he saw her. She was changing clothes, her back to him, the soft curve of her waist visible as she pulled on a dress. It wasn't scandalous, at least not at first. But then she turned, catching him in the doorway, and for a moment they just stared at each other. She didn't scream or rush to cover herself. Instead, she glanced down shyly, quietly stepped over to close the door, and then turned back with a knowing smile. From that moment, things escalated. Iffy started wearing more revealing clothes around the house, subtle at first, short skirts, loose tops, but soon enough her intentions were clear. And Femi? He tried to resist. He really did. But the pull between them was too strong. It wasn't just lust. There was something deeper there, something that had been missing from his marriage for so long. Intimacy, connection, attention, the feeling of being seen. You might be wondering, what about Amara? Did she notice? Did she suspect? The truth is, she was so caught up in her work and her deadlines that she didn't see what was happening right under her nose, or maybe she didn't want to see it. Maybe she thought that if she just worked hard enough, everything at home would be fine. But it wasn't fine. Not by a long shot. One evening, when Amara was away on yet another business trip, it finally happened. Iffy and Femi gave in to the desire that had been simmering between them for weeks. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even supposed to happen. But it did. And from that moment, there was no going back. They tried to keep it a secret, of course, but secrets like that, they don't stay hidden for long. A few months later, Iffy found out she was pregnant. Femi was caught between guilt and a love he couldn't deny. He knew he had to make a choice. And so he did the unthinkable. He told Amara the truth. I wasn't there when it happened, but I heard about it soon after. Amara was devastated, so she didn't scream. She couldn't cry, not at first. She just stood there, her body stiff, her face frozen. "How long?" she croaked. "How long has this been happening?" Femi couldn't answer. He couldn't lie to her. And the silence in the room, it felt like a lifetime. And just like that, the marriage that had once seemed unbreakable fell apart. Femi moved in with Iffy, and they started a new life together, It was a scandal, but to them it was worth it. Femi later told me that every moment with Ify felt like betrayal, yet every moment with her was like the first breath of air after drowning. Love, after all, doesn't always follow the rules. Have you subscribed?